What I would like to talk about today, I guess you'd have to call it innocence in one's practice. This is not a new theme. I didn't make this up. Other religions have spoken of this theme, each in their own way. I know in Christianity there are statements that sound something like entering the kingdom of heaven like a child. There are many different interpretations as to what that means, and I would imagine that depending on which church you went to and which branch of Christianity and which minister or preacher you went to hear, you'd probably get a slightly different take on that. So today I would like to talk about maybe a Dharma-oriented take on that, because that truth, that need to remain innocent and childlike in one's approach to the spiritual path is fairly universal. It's something that most religions, most mainstream religions speak of each in their own way, and so does Buddhism. So I would like to elaborate on that. I would like to ask you to think with me, for those of you that have been practicing Dharma for some time, and even those of you that are fairly new and are engaging in your primary or first experiences regarding Dharma. Think of the first moment when you met Dharma and you were impressed with some of the elements of Dharma. For instance, the unique look compared to other American institutions that a Dharma center has. Our altars are different, our colors are different, our books are different, our uniforms are different. We're different, and according to mainstream American culture, we are unusual. So when you first met with Dharma, you probably had some awareness of the difference, of the exotic feeling. Perhaps for some of you, if you have culturally been exposed to this kind of thing before, or if you have some particular strong karmic relationship with the path, you might have felt a connect immediately. You might have felt, oh, this is more like what I understand than the stuff you usually see in America. Some people have felt like that, that's true, but still in all, there was some reaction to the exoticness or the uniqueness of Dharma. And then you might have heard some of the ideas of Dharma, and you might have become excited. Oftentimes when people first hear what Dharma is capable of, that this is of the paths that are available, unique in that according to, I mean, even in terms of Buddhist teaching, there are many different ways that one can practice Dharma, but Vajrayana is unique in that one can actually achieve realization within one lifetime, or at least not if not within the time of that actual lifetime, then immediately upon death. Vajrayana Dharma has that capacity to offer this great result. And this is unique and tremendous, particularly considering that this is the time of Kali Yuga, or the time of degeneration, the time when it is very difficult to practice purely, and when karma ripens very quickly, and the result of one's actions, perhaps even from the very distant past, are often ripening now, and there's a great deal of confusion, as you know. If you don't know that, all you have to do is read the newspaper once in a while, and you'll see, particularly having just come through the elections, we're all still confused. So confusion is rampant, confusion in every way, shape, manner, and form. So when you hear about Dharma and what it can do, you might become very excited, you might become uplifted, you might feel, wow, this is really something. So what happens to you when you're really impressed with a new idea and a new opportunity? Well, one of the assumptions that we might make, and this is a valid assumption, upon meeting something that is sweeping and broad and dramatic and profound and has been shown to offer this tremendous, unmatched result, we might think, oh, this is something very precious. This is something that I must take note of. This is something that I have to regard very highly. And upon thinking that perhaps this is the most dramatic or result-oriented thing that you could ever see or hear of, you might think to yourself, now here I've got to pay attention. This is an opportunity. I recognize, as most people do, I'm sure you've had this thought, that there are many things in my life that seem cyclic, that they always come up again, habitual. It seems like there are many issues in my life that are unsolvable. It seems as though there are many ways in which I simply go round and round and round. And oftentimes when we hear about something that could really make a dent in that or end that strong cycle of habitual tendency or reoccurring compulsive even phenomena, or at least disturbing phenomena, we become excited. We might also have the same result if we were to, say, at a very difficult time in our lives, go to psychotherapy, and meet with a therapist and think, oh, this is an opportunity. So we label our Dharma experience an extraordinary opportunity when we first come to Dharma, which is interesting because often that's the time of great innocence. That's really a time of great innocence. When we first come to Dharma, we look at the teachings, we look at what's being offered, and we hear it. We really hear it. We follow the logic of it. And the logic is new and fresh. And if the teacher's a good teacher, that new and fresh beginning logic will be presented over and over and over again in many ways and in many different forms until there is some confidence that the logic has been really followed and actually heard. So at that time, we're really up for it. We can really follow it. And what we're hearing is that, according to the Buddha's teachings, all sentient beings are suffering. These are the foundational thoughts that turn our mind towards Dharma. These are the thoughts that turn the mind, and these are the original teachings of Lord Buddha himself. So we're thinking, oh, this is really something. All sentient beings are suffering, and we are all suffering from desire. Well, that's new information. We didn't really understand that before. We just knew that we were suffering, and it almost seemed like we were afflicted with a disease that was eating us up, and we didn't know where it was coming from. So we hear the news that it's all really based on ego clinging or desire. But then we hear the good news, which follows the bad news, that all sentient beings are suffering. And we hear the good news that there is an end to suffering. Now see, who would have thought of that? We are so accustomed to suffering. It's like being born on a merry-go-round. You've always been going round and round. You wouldn't know what else to do. I mean, it's characteristic of our personalities. It's the way we determine who we are, how we have suffered. So we wonder, how, isn't that amazing? It's just such a sense of wonder comes up. There is an end to suffering? You can't even take that in at first, can you? What does that mean? Well, then the Buddha goes on to say, and that cessation of suffering is called enlightenment. And then the method is outlined. In some aspects of the Buddha Dharma, we start looking at the many aspects of the path, and we begin to learn right thought and right method and right action and that sort of thing. In Vajrayana, as we practice it here, that path, that eightfold path, is condensed into two thoughts, which is the accumulation of wisdom and compassion, wisdom and bodhicitta. Wisdom being the realization or awakening to the primordial empty state, and bodhicitta or compassion being the understanding of our nature as fundamentally the bodhicitta, and therefore the activity that upholds and encourages the bodhicitta, extensive compassionate activity. So this is a new thought and a series of new thoughts, and really when we first meet with it, the sense of wonder is enormous. Unfortunately, what happens later on is that once you've heard it, you actually never really hear it again. And that's really a problem. It's the biggest problem that we have. I don't know how many times I have looked at old-time Dharma practitioners, and I've looked at new practitioners who know much less, but they have maybe something tiny like Om Mani Padme Hum. That's all they have. Or they may have the 7-line prayer. They may have learned how to use that, and they may have understood that it's very powerful and very potent and a remarkable prayer. the level of practice between the old-time Dharma practitioner who is now no longer taking in anything else, who is now no longer hearing these fundamental teachings that are so precious and so essential in order to build anything further. The level of practice between that kind of practitioner and the new one who is shocked to hear that all sentient beings are suffering, or maybe shocked to hear that there is an end to suffering, that there's something that I can do. The level of practice of that practitioner, if all they're doing is a simple Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now I'm going to give you a rare and precious thing. I'm going to give you a New Age example. Don't you love it? This is it, kid, a red letter day. Is that thing rolling? Because we need this on camera. There was actually a test done years ago, and this test was, let's see, I think it was done back in the 70s, but it was actually done in a very scientific way. A lot of people participated, and the rules were very strict. What they did was they gathered together a number of famous healers. Famous healers. These are really famous people who are known for their capacity to lay on hands. They are healers. They work with auras. I'm making fun because they were so filled with the New Age jargon. It was just very, you could almost see what it must have looked like. The elite showed up, and we're all impressing each other. But that was the feeling that I got from that test, is that they called all of the name healers, the ones that are very, very famous, and the ones who were really have a lot of clients that they work with. These are people who had really gained a name for themselves. And then they got together an equal number of just ordinary folks. And they said to the famous healers, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you, and they split the large group into different subgroups. So they said to the healers, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do your healing thing, whatever it is, on this glass of water and transform it into medicine. Okay? So they said, well, all right, that's doable. The message is, with love, all things are possible. Unfortunately, when you're really impressed with yourself, often it's with me, all things are possible. But anyway, they were told to do that. And then the ordinary people, who had never heard about this before, were not even that spiritual or anything like that, were given some interesting, common, and even scientific data that showed that if we have a good intention towards something, and if we really have a proper attitude, that often things are better. And they explained that if you put your hands on either side of a glass of water, you can run energy through it that harmonizes it. They were explaining this in a very scientific way, that sort of harmonizes it, or pseudoscience, I should say. That it will harmonize it, and it will be in harmony with your own body, and you can actually make medicine out of this water by having this really strong intention and really considering that this water is now in harmony with your body. So they had them all do their stuff, and the people that were not accustomed to this, you can almost see they probably scratched their heads and went, well, okay, if you say so, I'll do my best. But they were asked, whatever you think, do the very best spiritual praying you can possibly do. I mean, really let it rip. If you have anything in you that has any mystical bone in your whole body, please apply it here. Let's do it. So what happened was they spent an appropriate amount of time, and that the healers did their healing thing with all the bells and whistles, and each one of them had their particular way to do it. One was a shaman, one was simply hands-on, whatever. They all did their thing, and they did it with all the bells and whistles. So, and the other people simply took their hands and prayed, and actually the scene was described as you could see a lot of knit brows. They were praying real hard, they were just really trying to make this thing happen. If it was possible, they wanted to see if it could really happen. And so I don't remember all of the details, but some of the people, if in the both healers and ordinary people group, some of them had some physical problems or even mental problems. that they were sort of ongoing. And they were divided into a subgroup where they were allowed to drink their own medicine and then report the results. Drink their own water and report the results over a period of a few days. The other people, and there was kind of a blind study thing happened, people that didn't have any problems gave their medicine to other people who had problems. And no one knew which group it came from. And so they drank the medicine over a few days. And the groups that took the medicine that did not produce the medicine, this test group, they knew that it was water that had been prayed over, that it was like holy water that had been prayed over, but they knew no other details. Well, what they found out, and there was another group, and I'm not remembering what that was, but anyway, those are the two that I remember. What they found out was that the group that took the water from the others, there was such a larger percent of healings and comfort and relief and benefit that was obtained from the ordinary people who prayed real hard. It was like, the number was phenomenal. I wish I had the study in front of me. I'm trying to remember it after quite a long time, but I do remember that it was something like the water that was prepared by the healers, there was something like a 20% recognition of benefit. The water that was prepared by ordinary people, there was something like 90% benefit, some remarkable amount like that. And there was also some kind of test that was done. Now again, this is not mainstream science, but there was some kind of test regarding their capacity at that time. They were developing Carillion photography and different kinds of energy photography, and that was used on the water also. Again, the water that was purified by the non-professionals was filled with energy that could be found on certain kinds of photography. Whereas the water that was prepared by healers, it had something, but it wasn't anything like the remarkable level of energy that these ordinary folks had. And even the practitioners themselves, the ones that actually did this, both the healers and the ordinary people, had to admit that when they had some of each, they felt more energy from the ordinary people. This was even the healers that said that. And that was a remarkable study. I think that scientists could find all kinds of ways to throw that one out of court. But I know for myself, I find things like that fairly convincing. That sounded real to me. And I have to apply that to what I have seen here in my experience as a teacher. And that is that many of the students who have heard it all, particularly the students who have heard it all from all the best sources and have traveled around hearing more and more, sometimes obsessively, of it all. And those students who have been practicing Dharma for a while and have gotten to what I call the fat cat stage. The fat cat stage is where you sit back on your laurels and you go, I know enough now about Dharma to be impressive. So I'm going to impress you. And it may be subtle and it may be, well, sometimes not so subtle. But they've gotten to the point where the magic is lost, you know? The romance is over. They're not really taking in the teachings anymore. Oftentimes there's a funny inner posture going on where when the student hears the teacher, they'll go, oh, I know that. Or, yeah, I've heard that one before. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's the teaching on da-da-da-da-da. Or, well, interesting that she's teaching that teaching today. I wish she would also include X, Y, and Z fact. These are the ways in which you can assume if this kind of non-surprise, non-delight, non-taste, non-involvement is going on in your hearing the teaching, you can be assured that not much is going in. Not much is happening at all. Where on the other hand, if you are one of the newer practitioners, or at least somehow magically have managed to keep yourself in this pure posture of innocence or childlike posture, when you hear the teachings, they're like delicious morsels. They roll around in your mouth and in your mind and in your heart, And you just think, how amazing, how delightful this logic, how delightful this information, how different from what I know and what I've heard. And there is a sense of maybe the first time you ever tasted as a child something beyond pablum. You know, maybe you tasted for the first time, I don't know, orange juice or mashed banana. The infant would roll it around on their tongue to the point where it was almost foreign. You could almost not take it in. That kind of delight actually provides a way by which the teaching can become part of oneself, can become part of one's attitude, of one's mind, of one's reality, even part of one's habitual tendency. If one were actually to assume the teaching or this new information can be used as an antidote to something that is troubling us. It can actually begin to change our habitual tendency because we are impacted by it. The mistake we make is in thinking that the teacher is responsible for keeping our love alive. So the teacher is supposed to come up with a new and interesting way of presenting the same old data every week so that once in a while we can hear it. That really isn't true. It's not the teacher's responsibility. It's one's own responsibility to maintain a sense of innocence. Now let's talk about what that might look like. So again, I would like to use some of my own personal experiences. I'm going to use, mark this day, another sort of New Age experience to describe this. It's an experience that I had. When I was in Sedona, I went into a sweat lodge. The reason why, and I know that this is a traditional practice in the American Indian traditions, but I also know that white people wouldn't have gotten to practice it if it wasn't the New Age. Go figure. So, I'll have to catalog this with New Age experiences. I went to actually a very traditionally run sweat lodge. And I was really interested in seeing what it would feel like, and I really was interested in seeing what it would feel like to do this in a place where almost no one knew me. So I wouldn't be recognized as being anybody but one of the people doing that. The only one who knew that I was anyone else was the instructor, was the leader of the sweat lodge. And I wanted to also experience it without my Dharma community around, so that my experience would be more uncontrived, more natural, more relaxed. There is something to be said for being in a place where you're completely anonymous and completely free to do exactly what you would do naturally, as opposed to being around people who have expectations of you. So I had this experience, and I went into it wondering what it was going to be. And I had both kinds of ideas. I thought to myself at first, well, this could be really hokey. I mean, it really could. I mean, you know, it could be really hokey. It could be, who knows, it could be, chanting chants, Indian-oriented chants that I have no knowledge of and have no idea what they mean, and so for me it would be pretty meaningless. I would just be making noises. Or it could be where everybody kind of has an act going on, and I don't really know what the act is. I'm just a little Buddhist girl. I don't know anything about Indian stuff. So I don't know, this could be really strange. But on the other hand, I thought to myself, well, this could be really magical too. I mean, just think about what it would be to go into this sweat lodge, which traditionally is like going into a womb-like environment, almost like the womb of Mother Earth, and reinventing yourself. That's how traditionally sweat lodges were used. A way to either solidify one's purpose or completely reinvent oneself and put oneself on a new track. The idea of sweating, of letting go of old toxicity, letting go of old stuff inside of you, and then letting yourself, drink new fresh water. In a sense, that's like letting go of old habitual tendency and drinking new purpose. Aligning yourself with the four directions. This is something we have in common with Buddhist philosophy. This could be amazing also. This could be pretty terrific. So I went into it with both ideas, and I sort of placed myself in a position of neutrality and left myself really open in a very innocent way. I just kind of went there thinking, well, ultimately, it doesn't really matter if this experience is like this or like that. What matters is that I'm going into this experience with a pure intention. I really intend to cleanse myself in every way. I really intend to let go of anything old and afford myself new opportunity. I really intend to have this be in alignment with my own personal quest, which is to never fall into old, habitual tendency, mindless methods, but rather to constantly keep my spiritual practice new and fresh and on point, you know. So I thought that's my intention, that's what I really want to do. So I went into the experience, and it was really interesting. It was really interesting. Yes, there was chanting. Yes, it was very, very hot, hot to the point where it seemed unbearable. It was interesting in many different ways. The people were there. Because it's so hot, the people wear very little clothing. This is very different from a Dharma experience. If you all came into this in bikinis wrapped in towels, I don't know how I'd act. I would just sit here and go, I don't know what to do now. So anyway, I went into that experience, and there were many things that were different and many things that were predictable. But I found that I had exactly the kind of experience that I went in there to have, which was that I was able to let go of something. I was thinking that this is an opportunity to reinvent oneself, that is to say, that to like enter back into the symbolic womb of one's experience and then come forth again. And so I'm going to use that with a great deal of strong and purposeful intention. You know, when in the sweat lodge, each person has an opportunity, you go in a circle, each person has the opportunity to speak their prayers and hopes and dreams out loud. Now, if you do that by rote, that could be a really tacky, cheesy experience. But if you really do that from the heart, really reaching in and asking yourself what's in there and what needs to be reinvented, what is sincerely what has to be done, and really kind of rip yourself open, it could be a very profound experience. In fact, it can be a life-changing experience. On the other hand, you don't really need a sweat lodge to make such a light, life-changing experience if you have the intention and purpose of truly ripping yourself open as though you were newborn. So I realized that these experiences were both possible, and I required of myself that I remain in this posture of innocence and really get as much from that as possible. Heck, nobody knew me, so why not? I was really going to go for it. And so when it came my opportunity to say my prayers, I was a little surprised at what came out. As per usual for myself, well, I can't say that I was surprised, but I was surprised that I could hear myself pray like that in public again. When do I have that opportunity? When I pray in public in front of you guys, and you have expectations. I'm supposed to be the leader. So here I was, able to pray in public the way I really, really pray in my heart of hearts. And I found myself crying when I was praying. I found myself asking nothing. My method of praying always is, and I kick myself forward every time when the going gets hard, I jump in the water first and worry about whether I know how to swim later. You all have seen me do this so many times. You just know that I'm like that. I make prayers like, you know, I really reject and renounce any comfort or safety for myself and any personal requests that I might have that might make my life better or easier. I discard them completely. I never ask for them. But I always go into great lengths and depths about the suffering of other sentient beings. I really think about it. I really regard it. I really beg for beings. That's what I do when I pray. When I really pray honestly and truly, that's what I actually do. So I had the chance to do that in this wonderful environment where other people were there to be supportive. And the interesting thing about it is that when you really make an extraordinary prayer, or a prayer that is really heartfelt, especially the sweat lodge leader, but also those there that were participants, will support you through some sort of verbal encouragement. Like those that are used to using the Indian tradition will say something like ho, or something Indian. I don't know what those Indian things were. But people that are not really accustomed to that kind of Indian experience will say something like, yes, that's right, go on, or something like that. We're with you, or something like that. And they'll support you. And when's the last time I've had an experience like that in a very innocent and non-teacher way? That was really wonderful for me. So the entire experience, I went through all of the cycles and all of the different elements, and it built on itself. And I came out of the experience really happy, like a kid is happy. Like, oh boy, everything is really cool. Just like everything just seemed really cool to me. I was just really happy. And it was because I was able to approach my path that I love so much with my whole heart once again. And so the conclusion I drew from that, based on the fact that I and some others who incidentally were new to sweat lodges had this extraordinary, almost newborn experience, which also was contrasted with the experience that older participants in sweat lodges actually have. There were even a couple of times where these older participants would lean over to you and say, you can lean down and escape some of the steam if you want to. Sometimes the fire is harder than this. I mean, this is the kind of, I'm like praying my guts out. I have intestines laying all over the floor. I don't have anything left in my body to sweat out. I think my eyeballs are, wrinkled. I'm going through this remarkable experience. I'm pouring my heart out. I'm just reaching for everything I've got, And these other people are telling me, oh, don't worry, kid. Sometimes the fire's hotter than this. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is really something. But I came out of that experience really moved, really refreshed. And when I spoke to the leader, the implementer, the leader of the sweat lodge, he said, well, that's the best use of the sweat lodge. It's not like, it is what you make it, but the ultimate thing that it can really do is completely refresh you spiritually, because what you're looking for is actually within you, not within the lodge. And for you to be refreshed is something new, something that gives you the courage and the power to really move on. So here's a wonderful experience, or a wonderful way that each of us as old-time experience can evaluate, practitioners can evaluate ourselves. Does that happen to us anymore? Not much, right? Not much. And so we keep thinking, oh, maybe soon some kind of refreshing experience will come to us. Oh, when will that be? Will it be this teacher? Will it be that teacher? Will it be our teacher? Will she finally teach the way I think she ought to? Will she finally teach as much as I think she ought to? Will she ever give me what I want? And, all these kinds of thoughts come up. And then we also, once in a while we have some kind of experience that gets our attention, and it really reaches into us somehow. How does that happen? Is it a mystery? Is it magic? Is the moon in the 7th house and Jupiter aligned with Mars? No. Somewhere there was an intention. Somewhere you called out. Somewhere you asked. Somewhere you opened the door. You forgot that you did that, but somehow you were ripe for it. These causes are interconnecting. If your heart is like this, no matter how many hooks are sent at you, they'll never connect. It's just going to keep doing this. And it's up to you to provide the link. Somewhere inside of you, you had this precious moment of intention that you probably forgot about. But it wasn't magic, believe me. And then there's another experience that I had. I'm going to bore you with all of my information here today. I'm so sorry about that, but you're going to be hearing more of that kind of thing because I think it helps. I want to talk again briefly about the experience I had of going to Tsopema in India and meditating in Mandarava's cave. That is where nobody taught me this, I just knew it by being in there. That was where she prayed and offered herself for the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings again and again and again. That is where she cried and tore out her hair and meditated on the suffering of sentient beings and could hardly bear it. And she went through it in that cave. That cave was her incubator, spiritually, one of her incubators at least, because she went through tremendous, oh man, the way she prayed, I wish today I could pray the way Mandarava prayed then. And I will continue to try for that. When I sat in that cave, well, I have to say that before I went to India and before I sat in the cave, I went to India and I set up that trip in a specific way because I had specific goals. If I just wanted to go do the usual proper thing, periodically I'm supposed to go back to my mother monastery, connect with my root guru, and get additional training and refreshment. Periodically I'm supposed to do that. I haven't done it for a long time, or I hadn't done it for a long time. And so I was getting ready to go on this trip, but I decided not to do it in the traditional way, but to take a kind of a gamble. What I really wanted to do was I felt like I had to birth something new. I felt like I had to connect with this power that I know is there at the root, but that somehow in this lifetime, because the circumstances are so foreign to me, and this Dharma is being taught in a foreign land where things are completely different, I sometimes feel like a stranger in a strange land, you know? And so it seems like the conditions of ordinary samsaric modern reality are just a little confusing sometimes, you know, and one can lose sight of the root of one's power. So I really went to India thinking I was going to connect with this and I was going to give rise to myself in some way. And that was my intention, and I was not going to give up until it happened. I swear I had this idea I was going to sit on a rock somewhere and just freeze to death, just like Buddha under that tree, until I could just get this, because I knew that something needed to happen. I felt that I was starving. I needed nourishment. So I spent only 2 weeks at the Mother Monastery, even though my precious root teacher was there, and even though his kindness and the nourishment that he lavished on me at that time is inconceivable. Still, I felt that I needed to go someplace where I was in charge. I was responsible. I knew what was going on, and I was basically alone to answer to myself. And I knew what I needed to reach for. I wanted to go to the holy places of Mandarava and Guru Rinpoche. I wanted to reach for what had happened at that time. At that time, when Mandarava and Guru Rinpoche practiced, they really literally changed the world. Of course, it isn't reported now. We hear Western white man's history, his story. That's what we hear, you know? That's what. But in truth, they changed the spiritual world as we know it, because they actually, naturally, due to their practice, gave rise to the empowerment of immortal spiritual life. And in that lifetime, they accomplished the deathless wisdom state. They never died. When they left the world in that lifetime, they rose up to the sky and disappeared, and hundreds of people saw it. Guru Rinpoche was meant, it was preordained that Guru Rinpoche would accomplish the city of immortal life, and it was with Mandarava that he did it. And at that time, at the time of their accomplishment, Amitayus Buddha, the Buddha of long life, came to them and granted them that in the form of recognizing Guru Rinpoche himself as Amitayus Buddha and Mandarava as his consort. And so their empowerment was complete in that they actually became the deities in union. And so this is the thing that happened, and it revolutionized spiritual practice as we know it. Because now there are options for one's spiritual practice if one practices deeply enough and heroically enough. Not if one just casually practices, but if one really practices heroically enough, where one can prolong and even realize immortal spiritual life, or the deathless state. One can realize that. One can accomplish it. Or one can simply extend life through difficult circumstances or life-ending circumstances. So this amazing thing happened, and I was going to go there, and I wanted some. I mean, I have to tell you, it was like, I don't want this that is supposed to be recognized as my past. You know, I was recognized as an incarnation. I don't want to, I wanted to hear it from myself. I didn't want to, I trust it, I believe it, I know it from my root guru, because he is my heart and my mind. Yet I needed to feel it myself. I needed to touch it. I wanted to smell it. You know, I wanted to own it. I needed to, and my intention when I went into that cave, and I went into that cave like, this is happening now. You know, with that sense of wonder and strong determination that you get when you know you're faced with the option of a miracle. When you know that, you are a different person. When you know you're faced with the option of a miracle. I went into that cave with this determination like never before, and I sat down and I got everything that I asked for. Really, I got everything that I asked for. The consciousness of Mandarava came to me. I realized it is indistinguishable from my own. I realized many facts and qualities about Mandarava. I realized much about their practice. And these two mind streams, my current mind stream and the mind stream of Mandarava, began to blend. And I had such a powerful, life-changing, and potent experience at that time that actually, many of you know that I'm interested in and into astrology. I had an astrological horoscope erected for that moment of time. And really, my personality has so changed since that time that I am more like the new horoscope than I am like the old horoscope. So it's almost like a spiritual rebirth. And when I look at astrological transits, if this makes sense to any of you, or current events, and compare them to this new chart, it is more truthful with this new chart than it is with the old chart. It works out more with this than it does with the old information. So we're talking about not only a life-changing experience, but also a change in one's method, one's purpose, one's sense of accomplishment, one's sense of self, one's orientation, one's complete orientation. Whether or not you believe in astrology, that's fine. You can just look at me and watch me over the next year and see if you don't think there's been a difference. Because you'll see it. Oh, trust me, you will see it. You may not like it, but you will see it. So, little by little, as in the same way that a child grows, this new empowerment, and that's what I have to call it, is empowerment, is growing. It is realized, it is present, it is alive in the world, it is reincarnated, and it is growing. To me, my experience is that that empowerment was stronger, more profound, and feels more fruitful than any of the traditional empowerments that I've ever had. Any time that the boompa touched my head, and the ritual objects touched my head, I never had such an experience as I did at that time. Now, is that because traditional teachings and the way that they are conferred is inferior to this cave? No, of course not. That would be saying that in the sweat lodge, let's see, maybe the new guys are on this side and the old guys are on that side. It literally did happen that way, that they tend to pair off, that this side of the sweat lodge was less powerful than this side of the sweat lodge. That would be as ridiculous as saying that. Of course, that's not the truth. What it means is that, and here's the bottom line, here's where I'm going with all of this, is that spiritually, once you get to the fat cat stage, you're dead. No matter what you're doing spiritually, if you're keeping your samaya, if you're practicing 8 hours a day, if you're doing all kinds of temple things, cleaning out the bowls and making offerings and dusting stuff and making sure that everything's beautiful and wonderful, even if you're doing all of that, if you've gotten to the fat cat stage where you think you're in charge, or you own the business, or you've just seen it all, or you're just not a stranger here anymore, or not new, you've lost your practice. You've lost it. It's gone. You're practicing by rote. I have a cockatoo that can be trained to do the same thing. If I put in the time, if I put in as much time into that bird as I put into you guys, the bird would be doing what you're doing by now. Trust me, this is true. But it's like practicing by rote. That process is so superficial that we hardly realize that we have gone spiritually dead inside. And we are afraid to ask ourselves the question, what is my practice? Do I feel, when I put on my robes or when I pick up my mala, I open my books, do I do so in the same way that you sit down to a bowl of cornflakes in the morning? Like, you got to eat something before you leave the house. And cornflakes are, soggy. Do you feel soggy when you practice your practice? I mean, that's a good word for it, wouldn't you say? Soggy is a pretty good word. Or when you sit down to do, is it like sitting down to a meal, an exquisitely prepared meal for the first time and you're really, really hungry? What is your experience when you practice? This period of innocence, this childlike way that one can practice with delight, with fervent regard, with an awareness that's on the front burner, not the back burner, not somewhere else, not in somebody else's head, but in the front burner, that all sentient beings are suffering. That they do not understand the causes of their suffering nor how to stop it, but that there is an end to suffering and there is a method. This beautiful news, when you first hear it, is like, for real? I can do this? That delight and that hunger that is provided by that delight is what makes your path work. When you go through the period of turning your mind towards Dharma, I've said it before and I said it again, it should never end. It should never end because you think you're not a baby practitioner anymore. In fact, the older and more fat cat you get, the more you must give rise to it continuously, reminding yourself of these fundamental truths and delighting in this information. Take nothing for granted while you're on the spiritual path, because the moment you do, whether it be your practice or the result, or your community, your environment, your teacher, or even the fact that you have leisure to practice, take none of it for granted, because the moment you do, you are no longer practicing. It is absolutely the truth that the academic who hears all this information and has it memorized and may really learn how to practice very well with all the bells and whistles and ritual implements and all of that, it is not only possible but even likely in our world today that that practitioner might not be even close to the kind of practitioner who goes around the stupa because they know that their life is in danger. Perhaps their life has been shortened by some terrible disease or something like that, and prays in a heartfelt way, Om Mani Padme Hum, in the expectation and hope that perhaps a miracle might happen. Or the practitioner who has really studied and really has come to the path seeing that all sentient beings are suffering and enough is enough. This is unbearable. It is unbearable to think that in this world there is such extensive suffering. And with that heart ripped open, can circumambulate the stupa and say, Om Mani Padme Hum. And that practice is superior to fat cat practice. So I'm speaking especially to those of you who are new on the path. This is your opportunity to remain a child. That might not sound like a good idea because we're all told that it's really cool to grow up and we ought to be all kinds of sophisticated and intelligent, and that we should try at every opportunity to make sense. Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm not sure making sense is the best idea. I think what is really precious and really important is to remain innocent. with a pure and noble heart. And if you go before the stupa or go before any of these altars and offer one rose, one flower, and truly offer your heart and say, for the sake of all sentient beings, make of me whatever is necessary so that all suffering might end. Or perhaps has been dealt the blow of realizing the immediacy of one's death, has come to the point where one has been, for whatever reason, shaken in one's life. Now I have students that have been afflicted with AIDS, that have come to that point in their life, or are HIV positive. I have students that have gone through remarkable, horrible trauma, or life-changing situations that have so boxed us, so KO'd us, that we're left panting and not knowing how to go on. Really, I have seen students go through life-changing, miserable situations. You have to understand that these are times of empowerment. This is empowerment. Look at this as an opportunity and a gift, because when that one stands before the altar and prays, I now understand suffering. I know fear. Facing my death, I know fear. And knowing that, I realize that all sentient beings are afflicted with the same condition. Whether it's now or later, they are afflicted with the same condition. Therefore, transform my life and help me to live long enough to be of benefit to others so that I might serve as an example or as a benefactor in some way. Please erase the suffering from the world. That kind of heartfelt prayer, that's the one that makes results. If you pray like that in front of an object of refuge, whether it is your teacher or a stupa or a statue or a crystal that you can consider to be symbolic of the absolute nature, or whether you face the 4 directions and pray, or the 10 directions and pray, whatever it is that you do, if you pray with that kind of heart, you are heard. And I know that this is true because I have received the most extraordinary teachings and empowerments. And I have received amazing blessings of being taught one-on-one with my teacher, Trekchoden Togyo. I mean, amazing, amazing opportunities. I have had my teacher open his heart to me and give me blessings that no one has ever received. I have had my teacher hold me up in front of the Western world in a way that he doesn't even hold his other tulkus up, because he had that much confidence in me. That kind of empowerment, I've had everything. I've had every blessing. But what has made me a practitioner and gives me confidence and makes me honor myself, and I think qualifies me to teach you, are the times that I have gone naked and alone to my own personal mountaintop, whatever it is, whether it's that cave or a sweat lodge or my room, my altar, my moments, and have begged and pleaded for the cause of sentient beings, ripping my heart open and not caring whether it was comfortable or safe, not caring whether I could own something or not own it, or whether any happiness was going to come to me as a result of those prayers. Knowing also that I would have to deliver. That if I prayed for the blessing to be able to benefit sentient beings, I would be required to live it. Oh, I know this. Trust me, once you're in the water, you will swim. You can take that to the bank. And I've lived that and been experienced long enough. Maybe, sometimes I have to say, finally I'm old enough. I'm at midlife here, so I am old enough that when I can speak of personal experience, you won't roll your eyes and laugh at me. You can see I've got some gray roots here. So don't roll your eyes and laugh at me. I've spent enough time here to know that this is true. You will be provided to put out. If you make the offering, you're going to have to live with it. But it will be your joy. Whereas if you pray like a fat cat, you're also going to live with that. And it'll be your suffering. Believe me. So, what I'm trying to tell you is that whether you are a beginner or whether you are an advanced student, if you are a good student, you are innocent and you are pure. And when you practice, you taste and feel and open your heart for that practice. You meditate on purpose. You give rise to new longing, new and fresh longing, almost like reopening an old wound. How marvelous if you realize, really, the finiteness of one's life. How marvelous, because then you are empowered to pray as you have not prayed before. There have been times when my temple was in danger. There have been times when I had the experience of teaching a class in which I realized hardly any of the people in the class had the capacity at that moment to really hear about compassion, what I was trying to teach about. They didn't have the capacity. It just wasn't ripening. And so I know there have been times that I did this. I went to my altar, threw myself, and did repeated prostrations saying, please, I gather together all of my virtue in the 3 times, past, present, and future, and I offer it to these students that their capacity to hear Dharma would be ripened. And afterward, I would go right back into the same group and the same teachings, and they were changed. Their faces were changed. They were alive. They were hearing it. I know the power of praying like that. And I know there have been times when my children have been in danger. That's when you want to scare me. You want me to pray? Scare me with my children being in danger. And not only my physical children, but my spiritual children. That's when you see me really pray. And I have seen amazing, life-changing experiences happen through that. And I have also felt the suffering of praying by rote, I'm sorry to say. But I will never have that feeling again if I can help it. If a prayer comes out of my mouth, I'm going to be there with it. And I would suggest that you do the same. However you pray, whatever you do, pray as though it were the last time you had that opportunity. Pray as though you were in front of the miraculous. You know that old joke about climbing to the top of the Himalayas to see that guy sitting on the rug so that you can ask him, what is the meaning of life? Pray like that. Pray as though you had just climbed the mountain and you were looking at the old guy on the rug and he could tell you the meaning of life. Pray as though it were your last moment to pray, as though you were going to lose your tongue after that. Pray as though everything depended on it, because it does. And in your practice, in your mind and in your heart, keep yourself innocent and keep yourself alive. If you think that spiritually you know everything, enough to tell others, then believe me, you know nothing. Refresh yourself and practice as though you were a living practitioner, living in your heart, living in your mind, living in your purpose. It's not too late, it can be done. For those of you that have gone brain dead or whatever on your path, it can be done. And for those of you that are just starting, if you hear these words and you are inspired, please practice them just the way I've given them to you. Forever. Always, while you have breath in your body. Make your spiritual practice, your spiritual contact, a true one. And every prayer, the potential for the miraculous. Because it is according to your intention. Intention is everything. Intention is everything. If you can pray by ripping your heart open, if tears come to your eyes, if you are moved to the depth of your being, if you can beg for the cause of sentient beings, then please do so, and do it without ceasing. Never let yourself get so sophisticated that you come to the point that you are satisfied with your practice. Never let yourself become so immune that you can say a prayer in passing without having something catch in your throat. I'm asking you to be there with your purpose. Go into your cave. Meet with the core or root mind stream that is your being, your nature. Whatever that is you're looking for when you look into the eyes of your root guru and you're hungry for something. Whatever it is that you want that made you come here to the path, keep it open. Approach the core of your being with that prayer, and the only way that you can do that is by ripping it open and letting it be. Be alive spiritually. That's really what I'm trying to say to you today. That I've had those experiences. I know the difference. And I wanted to convey to you that you are both in trouble and free. Don't you see? You're in danger of losing that every single minute. And yet you are free to go that deep and that pure and that innocent every single minute. In conclusion, I've even had the sickening experience of watching myself pray because one of my children was in danger. They weren't coming home on time or something, and I had a real bad feeling about it. And when I have a real bad feeling about it, there's reason to be panicky. So or some physical problem or something has happened to my child. I know my older son one time had Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and they were not able to diagnose it because we were on the East Coast. We didn't know the Rocky Mountain spotted ticks had gotten over. And so he was dying. His brain was swelling. His eyes were going out of focus. He was gritting his teeth so much that his teeth were starting to crack. His organs were swelling inside his body. You could palpate his liver. Unbelievable what was happening. They didn't know why. He was dying. And boy, you never heard prayer like that before. I remember, it was before I met Buddhism, so I didn't know from prostrations, but I was on the floor, up and down on the floor, begging and pleading, exchanging my life over and over again, vowing that I would do nothing but benefit sentient beings, asking that I would be transformed into whatever it was that was necessary that my son could live. Oh, I prayed unbelievable. And then when the medicine, it was a simple medicine. Once they figured out what it was, tetracycline. That's all it took. So when and also at that point it was so bad they had to give him cortisone to bring the swelling down. But when the healing started, and the first time I remember his eyes could focus, and I could put a spoon in his mouth without him breaking his teeth on it. I remember giving thanks and just being, it was like a new day, like I'd been born all over again. Unbelievable. How was it then that a month later, when my son was eating hot dogs and running around and had gained some of the weight back and was looking normal, how was it then when I prayed, I didn't feel that same magic? I didn't cry. I didn't beg. How was it I could watch myself pray from that element, from that point of being so raw, and then a month later pray like a politician? How's that possible? Because it's possible to all of us, don't you see? I'm sharing this with you so that you'll understand there's a way out of it. There is a way out of it. It is your natural tendency, and there is a way out of it. And only you can do this. I can't do this for you. No one can do this for you. Don't wait until life's misfortune forces you. Because each of you has the karma to be taught this, or you wouldn't be here. You can be taught it in a passive and beautiful and beneficial way like this, or you can be taught it by life, which is a lot harder. Please, listen now. Learn how to pray. Learn how to practice. Take yourself off the path of familiarity and complacency and put yourself on the path of Dharma as it is really practiced and has always been practiced by the great Vajra masters of our tradition and the great bodhisattvas who are responsible for our salvation today. So this is my message for you today. I hope that you can hear it with your whole heart and give birth to yourself again. Maybe you'll get a new chart too. Could happen. So I don't know what else to say besides that. Now it's up to you. I wish I could do it for you. I wish I had that power, because I would. I'm not afraid. I'd jump right in and do it for you. But I don't have that power, and neither does anyone else besides you. You're in charge here, and the ball's in your court, but you can be alive spiritually. No.